Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Greetings, everybody, to this week's episode of Breaking History. Gordon, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good, man. You back in Canada?
Yep. We got back on Friday, and just as we landed, a day later, started seeing news items of different Mexican cities getting shot up, explosions, air flights, air traffic canceled. Not where we were. We were in the upper sort of western side on the Pacific coast. Cartel problems are everywhere. That's sort of an open secret. Not even a secret. That's an open fact. So it was a really good experience. We got to meet a lot of good people, spoke at a few events. But there is this shadow, this weird thing looming over Mexico that's been getting worse and worse, especially since I think Portillo was ousted. It was already bad. This organized crime syndicate network, that was baked up by the CIA during the Cold War. And it wasn't just the Jewish and the Italian and the Sicilian mafias and things. It wasn't just that, but it was that. It was also expansion into this organized crime apparatus throughout the Latin American states, Mexico being no exception. But then when Portillo, the president I think he's he was ousted in 82 or 83. He tried to like rein this whole thing in. He declared war on the Wall Street and London speculators. He basically said that we can't pay these usurious debts, and he created this debtors moratorium movement with other Latin American leaders from Brazil and Mexico, and he came to the United Nations and he gave this great speech. People could still watch online, basically saying we're on the verge of a dark age. If we try to pay these debts, we need to basically stand together and say we can't. And then he fought to nationalize a bunch of privatized, oil interests of Mexico, which he did, and then redirect capital towards kind of like a Hamiltonian system of credit development. So he was looking at what the United States had done successfully after the revolution. He was saying, we need to do the same thing, convert the bad debts into, reorganize them, create a legitimate kind of credit that would be tied to the industrialization of Mexico, with a focus on leading technologies like nuclear power. That was his big focus in his program. He even had Lyndon LaRouche go down to Mexico and build a policy package for him that was called the Operation Juarez, which he began to implement, but he got backstabbed. And the leaders of Argentina, the leaders of Brazil basically said last minute, by the way, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with the IMF. Good luck. And when that happened, he was left out to dry solo. He got tanked. The Mexican peso went on, was completely victimized. The Mexican people were punished for his belligerence. And the speculators, the vultures, just went down to just destroy Mexico. And what came out of his ouster and the destruction of the peso was just a complete humiliation ritual. And these organized crime networks were amplified in their power and their influence. And a lot of that was made possible through, the U.S. military industrial complex, which began fusing massive amounts of armaments, weapons, other things for providing logistical support to these Mexican highly militarized cartels, which, people could see them. They look like they're advanced special forces operators, with the craziest weaponry and night vision goggles and things. How did they get that? Well, they got that from Pratt and Whitney, and they got that from all of these U.S. based, companies that have been infusing them to build up something that would keep any type of legitimate government in check and down, so that the whole society could be kept under the control of this higher supranational shadow banking system. So it's nice to see that there's something finally being introduced to change that. Seems like certain aspects of U.S. Special Forces were playing a role, as far as I understand it, in advising at the very least and providing certain support to the Mexican Special Forces, who nailed what's the name of it? El
Mincho.
El Mincho. Yeah. That's interesting that there's a little bit of a fight going on there. And it seems like there's maybe a possibility that the rug can finally be pulled out from under the feet of these highly weaponized cartels. So that was good. But we got out of there just in time. So now we're here. Now we're back in Canada.
So where were y'all? Were y'all around where what is it? Jalisco, is that where that's where all the violence broke out?
Yeah, no, we weren't near any of that stuff. We were closer to like Tijuana, like on
Okay.
the northwestern side, which wasn't there. It hasn't suffered any kind of violence.
Gotcha. Um, uh, sorry, my wife's just texting me.
That's fine.
Yeah. So let's start there though, because we talked about a few topics that we wanted before that we wanted to cover. I think that probably makes the most sense. I mean, look, the stuff that we've been talking about for the past for months now, but really for the past whatever 6-7 weeks, ever since Maduro was quote unquote captured, right?
Mm.
We've certainly been talking a lot about Petro, of the Colombian president, who came back. I think it was February 3rd. He came to the White House. He gave a press conference. He said that in Spanish, and it didn't get any fanfare in the Western media, in the English speaking media rather. And he talked about how a joint operation, how he proposed like a joint operation against the cartels to Trump, and then what's his name, Diosdado, I forget his last name, the security and intelligence minister from Venezuela, then put out a video that Petro boosted that said, this is nonsense. Maduro is the one who actually originally, a year ago, is the one who actually originally proposed this joint operation, and now you're trying to like take credit for it. And he quote posted the video and said, yeah, like this is true, but here's where the proposals differed a little bit. Just adding a little bit of nuance, but really like affirming what this guy was saying. And then we get this story. Let me pull this up. So this is from the New York Post. Hold on one second, man.
Yeah, they also got his. Didn't they get his brother, his son last year? Like last March, he got arrested in the United States and was.
So like this New York Post article, it says Trump quietly got Mexico to hand over 100 cartel leaders, including El Mencho's brother, before Jalisco raid. And they really bury the lead here, because it says the Justice Department said many of the 92 defendants released to the Americans had U.S. extradition requests that were not honored during the Biden administration. But here's where the lead is actually buried right here. It says, this is from Pam Bondi, quote, as President Trump has made clear, cartels are terrorist groups, and this Department of Justice is devoted to destroying cartels and transnational gangs. Attorney General Pam Bondi said of the first round of transfers, which kicked off last February. We will, quote, we will prosecute these criminals to the fullest extent of the law in honor of the brave law enforcement agents who have dedicated their careers and in some cases given their lives to protect innocent people from the scourge of violent cartels. And so it goes on to explain, it says the alleged cartel members, quote, including terrorists from the Sinaloa cartel, CJNG, which is the one I believe El Mencho is in charge of, and others will now pay for their crimes against the American people on American soil, she added. So the lead that gets buried is the fact that this has been going on for a year. The first transfer of these cartel bosses was last February.
That's so fascinating, eh?
And they're saying that like they don't specify when these people were originally arrested, but they say that their extradition requests that were not honored by the Biden administration, which makes it sound like Mexico had these guys in their possession and were sending requests to the DOJ, and the DOJ was like not responding or like not saying yes. So you have to wonder how long these people have actually been like in custody. But we can confirm based on what Pam Bondi's saying is that it sounds like there were three like transports. One that happened last February. It sounds like there was one that happened in August, and then one that happened last month. And total, it was like 92 cartel leaders over those 3 trips were brought over to the U.S., which again affirms a number of things. It affirms what Petro was saying, that we're going to go after the cartels together, all of us together. It affirms what Petro said last February in 2025 when he held a press conference and said that the Sinaloa cartel is actually the one that is backing the National Liberation Army, which is a militia that operates like in the northern part of South America, Venezuela and Colombia, and has been operating since 1963. And he said that the ELN, which is the acronym for it, is actually a wing of the Sinaloa cartel, and its purpose is to secure land-based trade routes for the cocaine trade.
And what's the name? This is the ELM?
Yeah, the National Liberation Army, which has been operating since 1963. And by the way, like the official narrative, according to all the liars in the U.S. government, is that Maduro is like in league with these guys, and yet Maduro has like obviously been opposing these people.
Clearly,
so as has Petro.
Yeah.
It also affirms Diosdado Ciudad, I think is his name, when he says that Maduro is the one who originally proposed this to Petro, and Petro said, yes, that's true. So we're getting a lot of confirmation that these joint operations against the cartels have been happening. Now, to your point, let me pull this up. Here's here's Trump, like right after Maduro gets busted, gets quote unquote captured. Here's what he said when he was on Fox News.
Well, it wasn't meant to be, and we're very friendly with her. She's a good woman, but the cartels are running Mexico. She's not running Mexico. The cartels are running Mexico. And we can be politically correct and be nice and say, oh, yes, she is. No, she's very, she's very frightened of the cartels. They're running Mexico. And I've asked her numerous times, would you like us to take out the cartels? No, Mr. President. No, please. So we have to do something because we lost. The real number is 300,000 people, in my opinion. They like to say 100,000. 100,000 is a lot of people, but the real number is 300,000 people. And we lost it to drugs, and they come in through the southern border, mostly the southern border. Plenty come in through Canada, too, by the way, in case you don't know. But they come in through the southern border, and something's going to have to be done with Mexico.
Okay. And so here's Trump. I believe this is on Sunday on Air Force One. Listen to this.
So Mexico is saying that I offered to take us.
Damn it. I forgot.
A lot of background noise.
No, I forgot that when that particular video, for some reason, like when I embed videos now into Substack, like the Substack, they don't always upload properly. It's very strange. So we get these like little like jump glitches. Let me just I'm pulling up the raw I have the raw video right here. All right.
So Mexico is saying that I offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to take care of the cartel. She wants to know, is that true? Do you think I'm going to answer that question?
That's why I'm asking. We'll see.
I will answer it. It's true. Because they are horrible people that have been killing people left and right, they've made a fortune on selling drugs and destroying our people. We lost 300,000 people last year to fentanyl and drugs. They're bad news. Yeah, that's true. If Mexico wanted help with the cartels, we would be honored to go in.
So this is just from a few days ago. And yet, like, again, this is kind of like what I've been saying about Trump's style and the way that like he engages in this narrative warfare, where he's not being 100% honest with the public when he says this stuff, because he's saying that Mexico doesn't want our help, like to go after the cartels. And yet we now are learning from Pam Bondi, who's making these public statements that are being quoted in the New York Post, that actually Mexico has been asking to extradite these guys for at least the past year. It could be longer. It sounds like it's going back to the Biden administration. And we have actually been receiving these transport planes of captured cartel leaders going back to just a few weeks after Trump first entered office, which suggests that I mean, they were, it's not like Trump entered office on January 20th and then all of a sudden Mexico went and arrested these guys, right? I mean, that probably was an operation that would have required, more sophisticated planning.
Well, yeah, and I think too, part of it is that when you have a prison system under the control or the influence of the cartels itself, that when you're in the prison system of Mexico, it doesn't mean that you don't have the type of influence that you were enjoying outside of the prison. When you have much of the police, not all, but a big chunk of the police, a big chunk of the prison wardens and other things on the payroll, a lot of these people who are in the prison system they're high level players within the cartels. They could still execute orders. They could still have a lot of influence. But if you get them out of Mexico and into another nation's prison system, then you cut off a lot of their influence, their ability to carry out orders and things like that too. That might be a factor in that. What do you got there? President Sheinbaum invites nearly 20 U.S. Navy SEALs to train. Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah. So this is, I believe it was February 11th is when it may have been 13th. But because remember, February 10th, we got that closure of the airspace over El Paso because allegedly Mexican cartels were flying their drones over El Paso, right? And then they said they were going to close the airspace for 10 days. And then a few hours later, they said, actually, we're not going to do that. Airspace is reopened. So then like a few days later, the Mexican Senate, or at least a committee within the Mexican Senate, voted to allow SEAL Team 2, which operates out of Virginia Beach, to come down there starting February 15th. Hold on one second. So, sorry about that. SEAL Team 2 comes down from Virginia Beach to Mexico to train their military to their special forces to go after the cartels, which again, like that's a really interesting development. However, it sounds like they've already been going after the cartels because Pampani just told us that we've been getting these deliveries of cartel bosses for the past year. So, you know, it seems like it's a little late, like after the fact, to be training the Mexican special forces to fight the cartels if they've been capturing these people for at least the past year. You know, also like this Jalisco thing, like the murder of El Mecho. I mean, that happened on what was that, the 20? I think that was Saturday or Sunday.
Mm-hmm. So I think it was Sunday. Yeah.
So if these guys arrive, if SEAL Team 2 is arriving in Campeche on February 15th, and then the El Mencho raid is on, let's just call it the 22nd. That's 7 days later. I mean, is a week enough time to train the special forces to go after? So what I'm getting at is this feels like a disclosure, number one. Like it feels like reading a slow roll of a disclosure. A story is being told because Trump's telling us that Sheinbaum doesn't want his help when clearly that, like, even as he's saying, yeah, they're rejecting our help, he's saying that as the SEAL Team 2 is already in Mexico, at the very least training the Mexican special forces. But, you know, Cancon, who was, you know, he's a Marine. He was saying if our special forces are in Mexico, then they're probably participating in the raids. He can't imagine that they're not in country and not actually physically part of the raids.
Well, I think, part of it too is that it's very important that you have a third party that is there because, you know, it's been fatal for any law enforcement officers or politicians who have wanted to rein in these cartels at any time, where if, you know, whole families have been wiped out in revenge and vendetta, and if they get a whiff of your identity, you're pretty much dead. I think, you know, you look at some of these election cycles in Mexico for even local mayors and the amount of mortality. It's like the dangerous thing in Mexico is to be a half honest person running for political office or attaining a position of influence, and you're honest within law enforcement, you're likely going to die, it seems. So you need to have this sort of narrative from, you know, introduced that allows for the presence of, you know, U.S. Navy SEALs and other things like that to protect the people who are there in Mexico, to protect Sheinbaum, to protect others who are otherwise going to really face a lot of repercussions if they take ownership of these activities. But
so here's an article from February 22nd. It says Mexico confirms cooperating with the U.S. in operation that killed Jalisco cartel leader El Mencho. And so there's a video, there's videos on X of Sheinbaum like speaking and like affirming that the U.S. was assisting them in doing this. This is like, I think this is from the same day. This is from Sunday. So this would be, I think, the same day of that Trump video we just watched of him saying that, yeah, we offered and they declined. Like, but we're willing to help if they want it. So again, like, different narratives being told, right? And then right here, it says The New York Times detailed in a recent report that the Trump administration first made such a request since early last year, but then dropped it. However, the topic was brought back to the conversation following the capture of Venezuela's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro, on January 3rd. So again, this contradicts like what they just said right there, that the Trump administration made requests since early last year. That somewhat aligns with what Pam Bondi says in this other article that comes out a day or two after this one, where Pam Bondi is saying that extradition requests were being made as early as early last year. But it sounds like those requests were coming from Mexico. So it's like, wait a minute. The New York Times is reporting that the Trump administration is making a request that's getting denied. Pam Bondi is saying that the Mexican authorities were making requests that were being denied by the Biden administration. So again, this kind of aligns with a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing of this narrative chaos where we're not getting the straight story from like an authoritarian source, like from like a single authority. It's like, depending on who you're talking to, you're getting a different it's like a game of telephone. You're getting a different version of the story, and that is causing, I think, a lot of confusion. And I think there's intent there. I mean, my speculation, if I were to wonder why that would be, is this intentional? It must be, right?
Yeah,
because
sure.
you have Pam Bondi saying one thing and Donald Trump saying another.
Yes,
that doesn't make any sense.
No,
But if this is an actual real operation against the cartels, and they're reading the same newspapers that we're reading, right? You want them to be as confused as we are.
Almost certainly.
Because they don't quite understand what's happening, right? So that's kind of where I am. And then the last thing I'll say on this is remember what Petro was saying after he met with Trump a few weeks ago. He said that the request he made to President Trump was that they together not only go after the cartels, not only go after the guys in fatigues with rifles in the jungle, but we need to go after the bankers in the big cities, like in Europe, the United States, and the Middle East, who are the financiers of the cartels. Because if you just take out the guys in the jungle, they're just going to get replaced by these bankers. And there is evidence to show that, like, it does appear that the banks are being targeted. I mean, we have that guy, Dave, I think his name is David Blafosky, who testified to the Senate a few weeks ago about his investigation into Credit Suisse, and his full report is expected sometime later this year. So again, like, all this stuff does seem to be happening. All this stuff does seem to be connected. Petro is telling us it's all connected. What Petro was prognosticating, so to speak, predicting, is coming to pass. Like, he literally said, "What I propose that we do joint operations against the cartels." And now we have a major narrative event where there's videos of like Mexican cities on fire because the cartels are like revolting because their leader was taken out. I mean, this is pretty notable, right? But it also sounds like this war has been going on for at least a year.
Yeah, or if not a little bit longer still. I mean, especially if you think about the multifaceted aspect of this thing, which involves not just these cartels that have been getting support from nefarious elements from within the United States on the military production level that I was referring to, but as you pointed out, the banking level. And we know that it was only in 2024 that you had Toronto Dominion Bank, which has a massive presence inside of the United States. It's a Canadian bank, which means British bank, that has a massive presence in the United States, that was busted for the world's biggest drug money laundering and terrorist financing scheme that they'd been pulling off for many, many years. They were slammed with a $3 billion fine, which again is probably just a fraction of what they should have been dealt with, but still, it forced to the uncomfortable skeletons to be pulled out of the closet. And the head regulator at the TD Bank was fired. Again, you could say it's a bit of a slap on the wrist. It's a little bit ceremonial, but that was already in 2024 that was happening in conjunction with U.S. law authorities that were mapping out the Canadian involvement. And since the Cold War days, the Canadian banks have been amongst the most influential banks in organizing international organized crime and keeping that going. We know that from the standpoint of, like, even Dope Incorporated, this 1978 book, fantastic book that documented the Canadian banks, especially with their involvement in offshore tax havens and money laundering centers that have been created since I think 1946 or even earlier, was when the British started using the Cayman Islands as, havens for shell companies, tax havens, to create just untraceable cash flows in the trillions of dollars, which have been organized again by Scotiabank, by Royal Bank of Canada, which purchased all of HSBC's Canadian holdings. HSBC, we know, was also discovered back in 2012 to be a major drug bank laundering money. And as soon as that happened, they got fined with, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars of fines. And, but they kept doing it. That was the thing. And they've got penetrations. This is the drug bank that was created to destroy China. They were created in 1865 in order to be an opium bank, to run the opium, the drug economy of the 19th and 20th centuries out of London. Though they had the name Hongshang Bank of Commerce, they were a London-based bank designed to destroy China and to keep China subdued. And then they started penetrating, the West through, they came into the United States in the 70s by a violent takeover of Midland Bank, one of the biggest American banks that was going defunct. And they came in like a virus taking over a white blood cell. And they got that Trojan horse inroad, and they began just doing massive money laundering inside of the United States, propping up various organized crime networks there. And the same thing for Canada too. When they came in, it was through their takeover of the Bank of British Columbia in the 70s. That was supposed to be a productive credit bank for the development of the industrial base of the real economy. And that thing was sabotaged by forces inside of Ottawa, by forces inside of London. And as soon as that thing was weak enough and defunct enough, all of a sudden the argument could be made, well, you got to open up for an international buyer because you can't do it yourself. And HSBC was right there buying up the Bank of BC. And as soon as they did that, all of a sudden you had a much more smooth flow of heroin from the Golden Triangle, from Cambodia, from Laos, that was already bringing in this stuff since the Korean War, right? Since the end of World War II, they were already working with the CIA, with Dulles, with the KMT at managing these opium and other poppy fields and things in Laos and in Vietnam. And then it came into the United States through British Columbia, through Vancouver, which it still seems to do to this very day, which is why HSBC was such a major shareholder in of Air Canada, the biggest Canadian airline industry, like the dominant one, which was privatized in 2003. They were privatized, and then all of a sudden, you started seeing HSBC stickers and posters everywhere because they need that infrastructure to bring in the drugs. And the same thing happened in Latin America. So, but there has been, it seems, a shift of policy, and it seems even before Trump, when the TD Bank was caught doing this and was, made public that they were actually doing this on a big scale, that seems to have indicated a certain type of shift at the very least. And as you pointed out, there has been an accelerated crackdown on a lot of the Credit Suisse and the other strange agencies that also seem to have some weird Canadian connections, as you went through a couple of weeks on this very show, which is very interesting. The other thing I was thinking is China. I've got to do a debate in a few weeks, and I'm just trying to get my facts together. But have you noticed that a lot of people who consume conservative media, even alternative media, are led to believe that these Mexican cartels that are active in Canada, the Sinaloa and other things, as well as obviously Mexico, are run as instruments of the Chinese? Is that something you've been encountering?
Oh, absolutely. Every single clip that I've seen of like two people engaging about this, and when I say people, I mean, television personalities, for lack of a better word. I mean, high level, large follower count, influencers like in the truth community, but also like the Con Inc. and all that crap. Mm-hmm. Every single time they talk about this, they talk about these cartels. The other person would cut in and say, the fentanyl's coming from China. It's like, the fentanyl's coming from China. And then the other guy would be like, yeah. Like the precursors come from China, but it's being mixed up in Mexico and shipped it. Like every single time they have to be very clear that it's coming from China, which makes me think it's coming from somewhere else. It's like, well, if they're, this is like the Iran thing and the Russia thing. It's just over and over and over. These like career liars who lie to us about everything, but they're not lying about this one thing, guys. Yeah, it's really like, to me, that's the frustrating part, and we can kind of transition into maybe the next topic that we were discussing. Like,
Well,
yeah,
just on that note,
finish the cartel thought if you have any other thoughts.
No, yeah, I'll just say quickly on that note. I did actually a whole show on this a couple of weeks ago, and I've got a better handle now than I did maybe a few months ago. But it seems like the fentanyl thing, honestly, people really got to. India seems to have taken the lead. So where China used to do the precursors en masse up until 2019, they actually put down on Trump's request, like there was a lot of to like classify all of these fentanyl precursors and fentanyl per se, but also many of the precursors as class 1 drugs. And China did what no other country did as the biggest crackdown with like zero tolerance on anybody breaking that law. As far as getting heavy sentences, they shut down like
death penalty. Death penalty. Didn't like Trump says they give
so many death penalties for people who are like high up like decision makers in the fentanyl production networks, especially after it was made a class 1 drug. Yeah, it's the biggest crackdown ever. But a lot of the facilities, the production facilities, escaped China and have gone to India. And now India, it seems, is one of the dominant, if not the dominant, fentanyl and precursor production centers in the world, including like the manufacturing of the presses that are then sent off to wherever, Mexico, Panama, wherever. But India is now playing like one of the bigger roles in this whole thing, which isn't being discussed. But also the other thing is that this whole operation was created by Western big pharma cartels like Purdue Pharma, which was behind this whole thing by massively, and this is so immoral what they did. They knew what they were doing in the 90s when they were putting in billions of dollars into promoting Oxycontin, which they knew was highly addictive as sort of the foundation of later on, fentanyl addiction. But they're paying doctors tons of money to give Oxycontin to their patients, other things. So this created a massive spike of addiction to Oxycontin in the 90s.
Yep.
And but it was a bit expensive. So all of a sudden, the U.S. goes into Afghanistan after 2001. You can see the charts, and all of a sudden, where the Taliban had completely illegalized and destroyed heroin production, because that was 90% of the world's heroin was coming out of Afghanistan. They destroyed it. It went down to like 5% under the Taliban until 2001. And then as soon as the U.S. Special Forces gets in, it jacks up to 90% immediately. And there's massive amounts of heroin available for 1/10 of the cost of the Oxycontin on the streets of America and Canada. And now that you have more broken men coming back after like doing tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq, doing things and seeing things that hadn't been done or seen since the Vietnam War, which also involved tens or hundreds of thousands of broken men coming back rabidly addicted, psycho-emotionally broken and addicted to all kinds of drugs in the 60s and 70s. It happened all over again. And they're coming to the United States, being discarded by Veterans Affairs, not being given the care that they need. But then there's a lot of heroin that's cheap. And so all of a sudden, all of the people plus new veterans who are addicted to Oxycontin are now all of a sudden getting addicted to heroin, which is giving them an even more hardcore high at a cheaper price. And it seems like it's being facilitated by Canadian, British, and American soldiers that are being just told to follow orders. They don't even know what they're doing, but they're told to follow orders from commands on high in Afghanistan to protect the opium fields, to the laboratories that transform it into usable heroin and then transport it logistically into North America. But then all of a sudden, as the policy begins to change on that front around 2012, 2013 under Obama, all of a sudden we find that there are fentanyls being cut into the heroin supply for the first time. And now we've got something that's like 50 to 100 times more intense of a high than heroin was being introduced at, again, a fraction of the cost into the heroin supply, which the ratio increases over the ensuing decade to the point that now chemical precursors and fentanyl and variations of fentanyl is all you're seeing. But fentanyl itself, it had already been since the 60s something that was a highly used industrial chemical. and different aspects of the precursors are used for antibiotics and antiviral medication and plastics, and it's used in the perfume industry massively. Like, it's used in so many different sectors, cancer medications, anti-malarial drugs all across Africa. So it's highly useful on a variety of fronts. And the companies, like, because of globalization, China had to produce the things we used to produce and then export them. That was something decided by Kissinger back in the 70s when he said, okay, the world is going to be divided around the have-not, producer worker countries that will do production of things, and then the haves that will be useless eaters who will be consumers, consuming things produced by dirty poor people. And the world is going to be forever divided around this type of dualism where everyone's dependent on somebody else. Nobody's allowed to be sovereign economically.
Yep.
And that was supposed to be China's forever destiny. That was supposed to be our forever destiny. And luckily, China decided to break free of that and start getting economic sovereignty again. But they still had all of this production. They're still selling to international businesses. We didn't want to do it ourselves, so they're doing it. And they don't have the ability to vet every single company that puts in an order for a precursor of a thing that they produce, It's like they have a website. A lot of these companies are set up in the Cayman Islands. They're set up, they look like they're legal registered entities. They've got a website, right? And they put it in an order, and you can't do background checks on every single company. So you sell them. You sell, according to the rules of the World Trade Organization. And then it's discovered, oh shit, these are actually run as fronts for cartels, overseen, protected by the CIA. And then it's, these things are combined, mixed in laboratories, pressed, and then infused into the streets of America, and Canada and Europe. Yep. But to say that China is controlling all of these these Sinaloan cartels and everything, it's such a sleight of hand. It's so lazy.
It's really nefarious, and lazy is the right word, because this stuff is not it's not difficult to like find the lies. When I say lies, I mean contradictions. Like, you can find the contradictions pretty easily. CanCon, I just mentioned CanCon. He's a Marine. He was deployed in Afghanistan in the late 2000s. He will tell you that his job and the job of his friends were to protect the poppy fields for the drug cartels. And the story that we were being told here in America, I remember because I was a teenager going into my 20s. I was, a college student in 2006. I remember being told that we were fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's what we were told. Like, nothing that any of you people say now to revise that history is going to change the fact that you told us 20 years ago that we were fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan, which to an extent it was true. Like we drove them out of power and we installed a drug cartel as the leader of Afghanistan. But if you go talk to CanCon, because I interviewed him for my Book of Trump show for the Afghanistan war, he'll tell you we never once, like in circa 2008, 2009, we never once engaged in a firefight with the Taliban. He's like, the guys that we were fighting were like the drug cartels. So that's really interesting. I was like, so wait a minute, so you weren't fighting the Taliban? Because I was told as a kid that you were fighting the Taliban. No, we weren't fighting the Taliban. And then now I learned that the Taliban actually were the ones who were trying to stop the drug trade. And then when Trump signs the Doha Agreement in 2020, which says, hey, if you give us we're going to give you your country back, Taliban, but you go hunt down all the terrorists who are operating there. And then they go and they do that. And then the Abbey gets attacked at Bagram when we were doing that ridiculous exfil exercise in 2021. And then I remember even then they were trying to paint it as like it was the Taliban's fault that happened. And then the Taliban is the one that goes and hunts down the ISIS-K guys who blew up the Abbey Gate. It wasn't the Biden administration. It wasn't SEAL Team 2. It wasn't SEAL Team 6. It was the Taliban that went and got those guys. Yeah. So like these pernicious liars who lie to us about literally every aspect of our reality. I think the thing that I find very frustrating is not the liars. Like we know what they are. They're liars.
Yeah.
Why do people keep going back to the well for more water when they know the water's poisoned?
Yeah, there's all of these dead bodies all beside the well. Yeah. And you're like, maybe this time it's like, well,
it's good water
all of a sudden.
I'm eating the fruit of the poisonous tree. I'm getting sick from the fruit from the poisonous tree, but I'm hungry, so I'm going to go back to the tree. I'm going to eat more fruit because, yeah, they lied to us about literally everything else, but this one subject, they're not lying to us about this. Like Fox News isn't lying to us this time. Yeah, they are.
No, I
They're lying about literally every aspect of your reality. They don't want you to understand the world in any capacity whatsoever. And even right now, they're doing the Iraq war thing all over again. And I have, like I think we talked about this last week. I have a lot of confidence, faith, so to speak, that Trump is not going to start a war with Iran. The posturing is there. All the signs are there. Like it looks like we're heading in that direction, but he's also it's one giant rug. He's putting all these clowns on this rug, and these people are full tilt, like going into it. These are like, I'm talking about the television personalities, the Mark Levins, the Laura Loomers, the neocons, the Republican leaders, all of them. They're going full tilt, running into this thing, and I don't think it's going to happen. Like personally, I just don't think.
I get the sense too. I mean, it seems like there's a calmness. And last week on our show, you made some very solid points. When you listen to the messaging coming out of the Iranian side, Larijani's messaging, who I think is overseeing a new diplomatic dialogue with the Americans in Oman starting tomorrow, as far as I last read about that. There's a calmness, a certain confidence. At the same time, there's also open scenarios for, as you pointed out, the devolution operation, where all of the governors of all of the regions of Iran have been told to find to delegate authority to people who can replace you if you're eliminated on a very high level in every single position of authority in the military and the political system. So there is also that. There is caution, but then you see these interesting ironies where there is still a motion towards discussion, dialogue, cooperation, negotiation. We know that Russia and China have committed quite a lot of themselves and their security in keeping Iran as safe as possible by providing a mutual security pact that added on to the existent energy and transport deals that have already been signed over the past several years with both of those countries. They're massive. We know also that Russia has made an offer, which is still on the table. I would imagine this is playing a very big role in processing a lot of the overly, a lot of the spent fuel from Iran that could be then sent back for the civilian nuclear sector. Trump is not even saying that they can't have any type of enriched fuel. It just can't be beyond a certain, threshold. So there is like an openness, it seems, for dialogue, despite the military buildup, despite the war propaganda that's going heavy. There is evidence that your hope is founded on something reasonable. I think that's true. God willing. And I found, did you catch the more recent shitty story from the SS Gerald Ford?
Yeah. Where their toilets all broke and they had to go dock in Greece. Yeah. Which again, like that seems like, here, let's just pull the story up so people know what we're talking about.
There's 5,000 people on this Gerald Ford, by the way, like nearly 5,000 people on a ship. It's like a city. It's huge. And they're very, very, a lot of them are very pissed because they've been stuck there for like a year on duty, not getting a lot of relief and support, it seems.
Yeah, so they're I think the way it goes is that they are supposed to be on 6-month rotation. So like when you go out on the aircraft carrier, you're supposed to be out at sea for 6 months and then you come home and you rotate out. They've been out for 8 months, and remember the Gerald Ford, I think in November they get moved from the Eastern Mediterranean to the Caribbean because remember we were totally going to have a war with Venezuela. That was totally going to happen. Didn't actually happen. Mm-hmm. And then now they've been sent back to the Eastern Mediterranean for this totally real war with Iran that's totally going to happen, but it obviously isn't. And so they're all mad because this is the narrative. They're all mad that it's been 8 months and now we're suddenly like embarking on yet another trip back to the Middle East because we're gonna fight a war at the end of our rotation. And so let me see. I'm trying to find like, so the only stories I can find are about like the protests that are occurring in Greece, but so here's a story. It says protests are being held on a Greek island against the docked U.S. Aircraft carriers. Iran tensions build. And again, this is from today or from yesterday. So protesters gathered on the Greek island of Crete late Tuesday following the arrival of a U.S. aircraft carrier that is part of a major buildup of American forces. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, docked Monday at the American naval base on Crete amid warnings by U.S. President Donald Trump of a possible military action against Iran. Let me see if they don't actually give you the reason for why it's docking, but the reason it's docking is because apparently its septic system is broken, and there's like videos all over X, which may or may not be real, of like just sewage water coming out of these toilets like on the aircraft carrier, right? And it's just like a total debacle. Don't know if that, like all that could be true. It could not be true. I find it interesting that this aircraft carrier is now out of commission suddenly, and it's like stuck in Greece and not like where it needs to be in order for this totally real war. It's a callback, by the way, to like what happened with the Iranian protest, because remember, like as we captured Maduro on January 3rd, that was where the Iranian protests started to hit their apex, and that was where like Lindsey Graham and all these others were saying, now's the time to strike. Now's the time. Like, and Trump was saying, we've got your back, protesters. Go move forward. Take the next hill. And all of the deep state Atlantic Council type analysts were like, wait a minute, we don't have any military assets in the region. We can't support these people. What do you like? Why are you telling them to move forward? And then of course they move forward, and they all get captured by the Iranian security forces. That felt like a trap. This has a similar feel to it, where it's like, oh yeah, we're totally coming to start this war, but we're gonna do a quick detour to Greece real quick because shitter's full.
No, I know it's pretty funny. It seems kind of contrived.
Doesn't make any sense. But what also doesn't make any sense is the idea that like we are telegraphing when the war is going to start. I mean, do you remember like 2015 when Trump would 2016 when he would relentlessly mock Obama because Obama would hold a press conference about like an airstrike he was about to conduct, and he'd be like, "We're going to bomb the city of whatever, like we're going to go bomb Mosul next week, starting on Monday." And then they'd go bomb Mosul starting on Monday. Like they do exactly what Obama said he was going to do. And Obama was like, "I'm doing the moral thing and warning everybody that this is happening before it happens." And all the military people are like, "Well, this is stupid. You're putting all this in danger." Like they know we're coming now. And that's what Trump said too. He's like, you're telegraphing your military plans before you send people into harm's way. So it doesn't make any sense that Trump said, he's like, I will never telegraph my military plans. If I'm going to do something, I'm not going to tell you. When people ask him, what are your military plans? He looks at me and he says, do you really think I'm going to tell you? That's always been his response to reporters. So when Trump is sitting there saying, we're totally going to war with Venezuela, like it's about to happen, guys, and then it doesn't actually happen. It's like that's like a callback to that. And then the same thing with Iran. Like first they said it was going to be Monday, then they said it was going to be Tuesday, or I guess first they said it was going to be Saturday, then Monday, then Tuesday. Now there's some clown on Steve Bannon's show saying it's going to be March 10th. It's like March 10th is going to be the date that we start the war. Like, why would we tell Iran that? Like, it's just it's so stupid. Like it's hard to imagine that people actually accept this information as like earnest, because it doesn't track. Like if you understand how Donald Trump thinks and what he said publicly, none of this tracks. And I can't imagine that like Bibi Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham honestly think this is all real, but maybe
it's hard to believe, right? How they have so much experience with this method, and yet still seem to play their particular role very predictably with giddiness every single time, despite having been disappointed so many times and having so much evidence to the contrary. There's a density, there's a psychological density factor, or they're pissed on the inside and boiling up, but they have to put on a happy face every time something seems to narratively fall into what they've been saying and standing for so many decades. I don't really know, but it's weird.
Yeah. Well, here, let me let's transition to.
Wait, before we do transition, let's read a couple of ads, because I realized I was a little bit tired and I totally neglected to read any ads. So let's start with two of those. Oops. Okay, let's start with Goldco. All right. It's officially a new era for gold and silver. Gold has broken $5,000 an ounce, and silver has surged past $100. In 2025 alone, gold jumped 64%, while silver skyrocketed 150%. And with political and economic uncertainty ahead, 2026 could be even bigger moves. After such a historic run, a pullback is normal. Metals move fast, so some consolidation is expected. But top analysts are calling for even higher prices. We've seen the first bank failure in 2026, with regulators shutting down Metropolitan Capital Bank and Trust in Chicago. Could more follow? It's no surprise. Americans are pulling money from banks and turning to the proven protection of gold and silver. Big news. Goldco is celebrating America's 250th anniversary with a limited time bonus. Get up to 10% free gold or silver, plus free storage and a free home safe with a qualifying cash purchase. This offer won't last long, so act now. Are we seeing the early signs of another 2008 style crisis? Don't wait for the next shoe to drop. Protect your wealth with precious metals, because in uncertain times, gold and silver shine brightest. Visit badlandsgold.com today for your free 2026 gold and silver kit and bonus buy. That's badlandsgold.com. All right, that was Badlands Gold. So now we've got a thing from Badlands Gold. Right. My Pillow. My Pillow's next.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
All right. Oops. Okay. I think that was the major two ads. There's two more, but we'll read that at the very end. The GART conference will be announced, and something on Okay. So what did you feel was best to transition into?
Let's talk about kind of building on what we were talking about last week. Let's talk about like the Huckabee Tucker thing, because I think that's
Do you want to play a clip of
yeah, you said you had a clip that you wanted to play. Yeah, go ahead and play that.
All right. Yeah, this is interesting. It's okay. Here we are.
You've appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right. And that would include like basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big piece of land, but here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. Mm-hmm. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
Right there, he said it. All right.
Yeah, he said it, and of course he walks it back a little bit. And I'll play a clip there. He walks it back a little bit because I think he understands how. Tucker calls him out for how insane that sounds. Speaking as the American ambassador to Israel, But again, I think, and I wrote about this last week in the news brief. Anticipating this interview coming out, I said Trump set all this up. Like, this is Trump's creation. He set up Mike Huckabee for this moment. And Mike Huckabee disclosed during that interview, which I didn't realize, but I went and checked, and he's right. He's the first Gentile to be appointed to that position. Every single person who's been the ambassador to Israel from the United States in our history, with their history of Israel rather, has been Jewish, including the first Trump administration, David Friedman. So the fact that we now have, number one, a Gentile, a non-Jew, obviously an ardent Zionist, Mike Huckabee, a Christian pastor, former Christian pastor, right? Mike Huckabee, I think, is understood. Like, most people look at Mike Huckabee and are like, he's a really, really nice guy. He's a really, really, like even Tucker was saying, like, very gentle, nice guy, right? And yet, when he was appointed last November, he was the first person who was appointed. I think there was like some minor aide that Trump appointed, but before he appointed anybody else to his cabinet, he appointed Mike Huckabee. And I said, number one, that is a signal, because that's a troll to all the people who were already up in arms about the whole Israel thing. But the fact that it was Mike Huckabee, I said, this guy, Mike Huckabee, has for 30 years on the record. He even said it like the year before, like in 2024. He said it during the 2016 primaries when he ran for president against Donald Trump. He said it. Yes. He said there is no such thing as Palestine. Palestine doesn't exist. Stop calling it that. Just erase the name on the map and just write the name Israel. It's already Israel. They're already
there for centuries before Israel existed. You look at any map of the region, and the name of the thing that's there is Palestine.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't, like, whatever your politics are on that particular issue. The fact remains that to appoint a person with that mindset as the ambassador to Israel in this moment in time, like in this political landscape, with the things happening in the world that are happening, I said, this is a ruse. This is a plot. Like, this is not like an earnest development. And it didn't even click with me that he was the first Gentile, the first non-Jew to be appointed to this position, which then sets up this moment with Tucker. Because Tucker, if you watch the full interview, I mean, the guy struggles to defend he's like defending pedophiles, basically. I mean, he's like pedophiles who are seeking refuge in Israel. He's making excuses for that. He's making excuses for the warmongering. He's making excuses for everything. He's making excuses for all the behaviors of Israel, all the behaviors of the IDF. And then this moment happens. Let me pull this up, and this kind of gives it all away. And I haven't seen anybody really pull this clip, but I've been playing it kind of all week whenever I can. Listen to what he says here.
Think I have a right to safety in my country too. So you can understand that I think most people feel they have a right to safety. I do think Israel has a right to safety, and I hope that for them. And I'm sincere, but I'm an American, and I have a right to safety in my country too.
Of course you do.
Agree? And I think so, but I just want to get to this point. If Israel were to say, God gave us in Genesis 15, all of Lebanon, all of Syria, all the way up to Iraq, would that be legitimate in your view?
I don't think in this particular day and time they're asking for it.
Would it be legitimate?
I'm not sure that it would be.
Why? You just said that God gave it to them. Because I think
that there is an understanding that the people of Israel today, now if they end up getting attacked by all these places and they win that war and they take that land, then okay, that's a whole nother discussion. But
and there it is. There it is. He said, if they get attacked and they end up taking the land in a war because they win a war, that's a whole different discussion. And that leads you to believe, well, that is the point of October 7th. I think the point of October 7th was when you look at what happened after October 7th. It always was very strange to me that we got this online algorithm campaign where all over X and TikTok and wherever else, there were these videos of IDF soldiers doing just really silly stuff, like going into like Palestinian homes in Gaza and like pulling the lingerie out and like kind of being goofy with it and like going into school houses and like drawing on the chalkboard and just being like obscene, like in these moments, and like posing with dead bodies. And Now that stuff could be AI. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if any of this stuff is real, right? But it was being boosted by the algorithm all over X.
Yeah.
And I've asked like the two Marines from Badlands, Alpha and Cancon. I asked them, I was like, if you were on patrol in Iraq or Afghanistan and you took those pictures, like, would you take pictures like that? And they're like, maybe. I mean, like being goofy, but it's like, would you post them online? Absolutely not. Never.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, would you get in trouble? Yeah, you get in trouble for doing that, right? For a number of reasons. And it's like, but it almost was like being encouraged, it seems like, by the leadership in Israel for these IDF soldiers to do this stuff. And my theory, it's just a theory, is that the reason it was encouraged and the reason the algorithms were pushing it was in order to foment this animus among the Arabs that would then result in them attacking Israel, right? Like, whether it was a nation state, like a formal military attacking them, or armed groups, like armed militias taking up arms. And yet the thing that stopped that from happening was Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, who summoned all the Muslim nations to Riyadh a month after the attack and basically told everyone to sit down and shut up. And like, there's a plan here. We're going to operate together as a group, and we're not going to, like, nobody should break rank here. And then you see Iran and Saudi Arabia restore relations after 40 years of not getting along. And all of a sudden now all the Muslim nations that have always had problems with one another are working together. And that's the only reason I think that you don't get them doing that.
Well, I think what we should do at some point is another week. It's been a while since we did one of these types of concerted deep dives onto the shenanigans, the Anglo-American shenanigans manipulating different religious cults in that region of the world, specifically with the Muslim Brotherhood, because I was just reviewing some of my old notes, and I picked up a book by William Engdahl called Whom the Gods Would Destroy. And it's a really good book going through sort of the backdrop of the Muslim Brotherhood, which it was a big wake-up call, right? In 2011, 2012 with the Arab Spring, and the role played by this vast network, which had formerly received a lot of patronage by Saudi Arabia, which had been since the 50s a major hub, a headquarters for the Muslim Brotherhood. Before that, it was Egypt, but they still had a huge presence in Egypt. But it was a wake-up call because it was real. They began to realize that this thing operates not on behalf of the interests of the Saudis or anything. It's something much, much bigger that this thing is devoted to, and is very willing to disrupt even the Saudi and the UAE and other governments that did have these Arab uprisings that did overthrow people like Mubarak in Egypt in 2010, the Tunisian government. We know obviously Gaddafi's sad fate, but a lot of this was made possible by this Muslim Brotherhood apparatus. And it was in 2015, after Morsi, who was in there for a little bit, he's a Muslim Brotherhood high-level official who was president after Mubarak. He was taken down in a general's coup run by El-Sisi. Mm-hmm. But El-Sisi's key ally was this guy, Adel Azab, and he was the head of the Egyptian National Security Agency. And he gave a testimony in 2015 where he said that we've discovered that Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood guy who was protected by Obama, had been negotiating with Hamas, which was itself an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood back in 87. And the founder of it, I forgot this guy's name, Ahmed Yassin, was himself like the head of the Muslim Brotherhood of Palestine since 73. So he's the guy who created Hamas, which immediately got a lot of support from the Israelis. Openly, we've got so many data points proving that that's the case, especially from 2008 when they became a politically dominant, or 2009 when they became the government of Gaza, all the way up until 2020. So, but Morsi had made a deal where he was trying to get Hamas to go and invade, to launch an attack on Egypt, and was offering to give them the Sinai Peninsula. That's a big part of the Greater Israel program too, right? Is you got to get a big chunk of that Egypt all the way down to the Sinai Peninsula. If you want to get down to the Nile area, at least. So it fell right into, if all of these countries are being pulverized, weakened, it would create a space out of which Israel could definitely benefit by growing and expanding into, or by reimposing order and justice into regions that have been, lit on fire. So it does seem like this thing plays together, and you could see it like with this conjunction of dual British German support for, on the one hand, radical Zionism that was made possible, or that the entire state itself as we knew it was made possible through this German English alliance over the Havar Agreement that you and I have spoken to so many times, that began the infusion of tens of thousands of German and European Jews into the desert with their possessions and other things. It was a big immigration policy, but that was tied to basically the Sykes-Picot and the Balfour Accords, and the British signed off on that. But at the same time, the British and the Germans were also growing and incubating Haj Amin, who was the Palestinian representative for the Muslim Brotherhood, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. That was the guy who was imposed by the British Empire, though he is famous today by soft-minded. I don't want to be too mean here, but I can't take it back. I just said soft-minded, so I stick with it. Soft-minded Arabs who don't realize that this guy, who they tend to see as a hero because he spoke against the Jews, he spoke against the British, he was himself there because of the British and the Jews. That's what put him in power and kept him in power, even as he was running these terrorist operations, massacring Jewish villages at different periods. He was behind these things, but he was working with Jabotinsky on the other side, who was also running these terrorist campaigns against Arab villages of Muslims, mostly civilians being tortured and murdered by the Haganah, by the Irgun. But so it was this gang counter gang reaction that both had the same influencers. And it's like, this is the legacy of what we see right now, when people are wondering, like, why would these Zionists like Netanyahu be supporting these anti-Zionist forces tied to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas? Why would they have this collusion, whether in Egypt or in Palestine? It's like, well, that's why. It's not as much of a contradiction as you think.
It's controlled opposition. And when you go and like, this was something that like struck me years ago when I learned it. I was like it all kind of clicked. It probably clicked for me before that, but this was just like one of those amazing discoveries was, when Gaza, after the Nakba of 1948, right, when Palestine is taken over by these immigrants from Eastern Europe, and it becomes Israel. Jordan becomes the protector of the West Bank, and Egypt becomes the protector of Gaza. And Egypt had a zero tolerance policy of the Muslim Brotherhood, where if you were found with materials, if you were found preaching, like if you were saying nice things publicly about the Muslim Brotherhood, you were executed. Zero tolerance, because they had a serious problem with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt as well. So that was the policy. And the idea was to keep the Muslim Brotherhood out of Gaza in order to prevent the fomentation of conflict with Israel, right? Then when Israel takes over both Gaza and the West Bank in 1967 during the Six-Day War, that was when they militarily occupied both parts of Palestine. And they maintained that occupation until 2006, when Hamas famously overthrew them. They immediately, or I don't know if it was immediate, but they rescinded that rule in the name of democracy and free speech, because they said this is very, very these don't align with our Western values to not allow these people to speak their mind. So we should allow the Muslim Brotherhood back into Gaza. So they do that. And then, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood takes over in the form of Hamas, right? So it's like, it's so obvious what is happening here. It's so obvious what they're doing. And then when Hamas and the Palestinian Authority negotiate in 2017, for the Palestinian Authority to take over the administrative duties of the government of Gaza, and then in early 2018, March 2018, the Palestinian Authority sends their prime minister in an armed caravan into Gaza to, finalize the details of this takeover, where Hamas, I believe the agreement, as I understand it, is Hamas would remain like the security function of Gaza, but basically all of the government admin stuff, which they weren't really that interested in doing, would be taken over by Palestine, by the Palestinian Authority. And so then this caravan gets attacked. There's a roadside bomb that blows up. The prime minister is almost killed, and that's when President Abbas loses all of his patience and says, "You know what? You can starve to death. We're not giving you money anymore. We're cutting off all the money that we give you. The $30 million a month that we give you is no longer." And then that's when Netanyahu goes to Qatar and says, hey, we have an opportunity here. He says that to his friends in the Likud party, but when he goes to the Qataris, he says, hey, we're really worried that if we don't pick up the slack and start giving Hamas some money, there's going to be a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So the Qataris agree to give the Israelis tens of millions of dollars every month, that the Israelis then walk into Gaza and hand the briefcases to prominent families with connections to Hamas, knowing that the money will get to the right authority. That keeps Hamas propped up. And that's what Netanyahu is now under investigation for by the Shin Bet, is he's under investigation for financing Hamas when they had all their funding cut off by the Palestinian Authority, and potentially financing October 7th, because he apparently knew about the attack that was going to come. He knew the intelligence was there, that they were planning this big, huge attack, and yet he was still giving them money and didn't do anything to stop it. And so, again, like, if you accept their narrative, that
are you serious? So he's actually those are some of the charges. Those are some of the charges. Those two. It's over his support financial.
That's what his political enemies in Israel are accusing him of. Now, to what extent that's true and to what extent this is just politics remains to be seen. But there's a lot of smoke there. There's a lot of smoke. I mean, we know for a fact, it seems, that he was financing Hamas in 2018, 2019. We don't know how. I don't know exactly how long that funding continued. But we do know that for at least a few years, that he was giving them money from Qatar. And now, basically, the finger pointing has begun, where Netanyahu is saying, he fired Ronan Bar, who was the head of the Shin Bet last year, because Ronan Bar was starting to investigate all of his aides, and I think he arrested one or two of them for their connections to Qatar. And so then Netanyahu says, or Ronan Bar gets fired, and then Ronan Bar leaks he leaks documents that show that this was happening, that there was money going to Hamas, Qatari money via Netanyahu. And then Netanyahu basically says, it was the Qataris. They were the ones who were financing Hamas. The Qatar is our enemy. Again, which totally aligns with what Mark Levin and Laura Loomer have been saying about, Tucker Carlson and all of it. And then the Qataris stand up and say, hold on a second, Netanyahu. We don't have access to Gaza. We can't just walk into Gaza. There's no airport to fly into. They don't have bank accounts we can transfer this stuff into. We were sending cash to you, Israel, and then you were giving the money to them because you said there was going to be a humanitarian crisis if we didn't do this. So you're the one who was giving the cash. It's finger pointing. It's like the agreement, like, it's understood by all parties that there was cash coming from Qatar to Hamas, and that the Israelis were facilitating it. But Netanyahu is trying to wash his hands of basically any culpability. But now it's getting to like a fever pitch of, not only were you doing all this stuff, but we also now know that there were intelligence reports being handed to him by Israeli military intelligence, and I think probably Mossad, they're planning this big attack. This big attack's coming, and nothing was done. And then you look at the day of, the official narrative is it took 7 hours for them to respond. So, Mike Huckabee, his big defense during the when he was kind of grandstanding during the Tucker interview was that, well, why is all this happening, Tucker? It's happening because Hamas decided to go butcher a bunch of people in Israel. It's like, did they, or were they enabled? Like, were they allowed to do that by Netanyahu? And the fact that, like, the world hasn't stopped spinning, like, hold up a second, like, record scratch, before we go start a war with Iran, maybe we should make sure, like, U.S. State Department, CIA, military intelligence, whatever, maybe we should, like, verify, did Netanyahu facilitate the October 7th attack? Because if he did, then we should not be starting a war on his behalf with Iran. That
changes the calculus a little bit. Most certainly.
Like, if you accept the premise that Iran needs to be militarily attacked, like there needs to be a military campaign against Iran for whatever reason, which I think is a silly premise. But if you accept that, at the very least, you should say, okay, Netanyahu is the one pushing this. We shouldn't be, like, just jumping in gung ho if we don't really even understand what happened on October 7th yet. Right?
Yeah. And just to say, just so people it's fresh in their eyeballs, and I know everyone's seen this map many times, but just to be impress upon people's minds what Huckabee and what we're talking about with Greater Israel. Here's the map. Here is the perceived justified land promised by God to his chosen people in the desert thousands of years ago. It's far beyond the Sinai Peninsula. You know, the Nile is way over here. And Tucker was right when he was describing the type of borders that they're talking about. And, you know, this is, I think when it became clear, the Arab Spring in the minds of the leadership in Saudi Arabia, of UAE, of many of the Arab leaders around the world, they began to realize that what the Arab Spring was directly tied to this. Now, it took us here in the West a little bit longer to finally realize it, that these are two sides of the same thing. But you can see it. Like, why was Netanyahu so desperate to push on this policy of getting the people living in the 2 million plus people living in Gaza to go and get sanctuary in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt? After brutalizing them for decades and then really terrorizing them over the course of the weeks and months after the October 7th false flag, why put so much effort into putting all of these people who have a paramilitary secret weaponized order around Hamas, around the Muslim Brotherhood, which does seem to have an esoteric paramilitary. It was kicked out of Egypt because it was complicit in assassinating tons of leaders and trying to kill Nasser on a number of occasions, which is why they were put down. But they were behind so many assassinations. This is the thing that makes the deep state of the Arab lands possible, is this Muslim Brotherhood apparatus. This is sort of the Jesuits. This is the Jesuit apparatus in the Muslim sort of context, which was, for those who haven't figured it out, the Jesuits are not Catholic. They're not really Christian. There are Jesuit people who are Christians and Catholic, but its essence, its esoteric inner top-down core has never been that. It's more tied to these ancient black magician priesthoods. That's it. That's what
it's leadership. It's leadership is like
it's
that.
Leadership. Right? Yeah, those who are the high-level initiates, the high-level priests that actually manage this highly fragmented system of cells and cells within cells from the top. That's what this thing always was, and it seems like that's what. When I mentioned this guy Adel Azab, El-Sisi's friend, who was exposing Morsi's agenda, he was also saying in that same speech that al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, was himself. There's no evidence that he existed before 1927. That before that, it seems like he was probably a Sephardic Jew who's probably from some mystical, probably Sabbatean sect within that was embedded within that region of the world. But he goes in depth into something that I think has a lot of validity, because this is where the Crowleyites have been interfacing with this thing within, that has a Sufi garb sometimes. But they've been the Crowleyites have been interfacing with a parallel system that operates within a Muslim skin suit for a very long time. And this seems to be the thing that generated this apparatus, which again always was tied to the growth of this strange ritualistic thing called Greater Israel. And if the people in Gaza were brought into Jordan, were sent into Saudi Arabia for sanctuary, or Egypt, the likelihood, the chances that the weaponized factions who have a big chip on their shoulder, they've been brutalized, they've seen murder, death, they've seen so much injustice, the chances that they could then start lopping missile strikes into Israel from Egypt, from Jordan, from Saudi Arabia would be very high, and very convenient for a Netanyahu to say, hey, look, we have to now go into Saudi Arabia. We got to go into Egypt and Iraq and Syria even more, just to defend ourselves. We don't want to, but now we have to. Oh, but now that we're here, you think we're going to leave? So very convenient. Outcomes.
Yeah, which is why the MBS variable, I think that was the variable they never accounted for, was MBS. I think they never accounted for an earnest peace-seeking visionary who actually was going to set a goal and achieve it. And there have been psyops for years now against MBS online, that he's like a crypto Jew, or he's like a puppet of the Israeli government. But the reality remains is they did the one thing that nobody expected them to do after October 7th, or the invasion after October 7th, and that was nothing. Everyone expected the Arabs to basically pick up arms and fight Israel, and they didn't do that. And it's like they didn't give Netanyahu the war that he was promised, and so that's left him kind of holding the bag as the bad guy here, because he was expecting them to step in and kind of play the role of the villain, right? And so he could then point to them and be like, well, these are the bad guys. Like, these are the guys who are attacking Israel. Like, Israel has a right to defend itself. We're going to defend ourselves. But that never happened. And so now, like, who are the bag holders? And so let's look at that. Like, again, contradictions. I look for contradictions all the time, because I think contradictions are that's like the telltale sign of what is actually happening. And contradictions come from not necessarily the reported events, because it's hard for us to verify what events are real and what are not, right? What's just like a story we're being told. I look for reactions from public figures, because whether a public figure is reacting to a real event or a fake event that's being presented as real, the reaction, I think, can be taken as maybe not earnest, but at least there's an agenda behind it, right? There's a reason they're reacting that way. So based on what Mike Huckabee says, here's a very long statement from the Saudi Foreign Ministry about all these countries, not just Muslim countries, but European countries, South American countries, Asian countries, all basically kind of coming together to sign this thing saying that they are outraged by what Mike Huckabee said, because for the ambassador to Israel to basically say, I think it'd be okay for them to take it all, right? Like, that is insane. Then you have this is from 2 days ago. Smotrich. In the end, Israel will occupy Gaza and establish settlements there. This is the far-right minister, far-right finance minister, right, under Netanyahu. He's a rabbi. He's an ultra-Orthodox rabbi. So he's coming at this from a religious element. He's also the guy who has been talking about Greater Israel and saying, like, Damascus was promised to us. All of it was promised to us, like the region that Tucker is describing to Mike Huckabee. Here is one of his underlings from the finance ministry, Zayev Elkin, saying that Israel will not fund the Gaza reconstruction. Trump held the Board of Peace meeting last week, and $17 billion so far has been promised. $7 billion from the Muslims, $10 billion. Trump says $10 billion will come from the U.S. My guess is he didn't specify where the money's coming from, but my guess is that it will be like private money from like real estate developers who are looking for opportunity to invest money. But Israel is saying we're not gonna give a dime, including like the $1 billion price tag to be on the security seat on this Board of Peace. We're not giving you any money. We're not interested. We're not interested at all in rebuilding Gaza. Here is a month ago, January 18th, all of the ministers from the security cabinet saying that they reject the Board of Peace, and they say that that we don't think is a good idea. Like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. No. Here is Trump at the Board of Peace meeting last Thursday, calling out indirectly Laura Loomer and Mark Levin.
His Excellency Prime Minister Al Thani of Qatar, just a great man, a great man and highly respected. And he's working with a man who is amazing. I always say he needs a public relations agency, because you do so much good and they have you down as evil. And you're not evil. You help us so much and you're such a good ally. And I just want people to know that. And the Emir is incredible.
Yeah, and so he's basically telling people to back off Qatar, back off Tamim. Tamim is the Emir. He's the leader of Qatar. And yeah, I mean, Trump sounds pretty genuine when he's saying that. I don't think this is, kayfabe or whatever. I actually pulled that video from a Laura Loomer post. She posted that video, and her response it's a long response. I won't read the whole thing, but she ends it by saying, she tags Trump in it, and she says, I love President Trump and I hate Qatar. I love America. I reject Islam. She says, she types out Trump's quote, and then she basically says she fundamentally rejects what Trump's saying. And so you have to ask yourself, why is Laura Loomer doing that? Why is Laura Loomer and Mark Levin, every single time Trump puts out something about, progress or whatever, heaping praise on one of his Muslim friends, Muslim allies. Why are Laura Loomer and Mark Levin running in behind Trump to subvert his messaging and basically say these people are all evil, we can't trust any of them? Well, Trump is saying we should trust them, and you're telling us not to trust them. Are you not working against President Trump right now? Like, are you not disrespecting President Trump? President Trump puts together a board of peace, which may or may not actually end up being something good. We don't know. Like, we don't know. I mean, like Tony Blair being involved, I get it. But President Trump is presenting this as like the solution. And then all of these, Jewish Zionists and in Israeli propagandists are running in and poo-pooing the whole thing. The leadership of Israel are running in and saying, we're not going to fund it. We reject it. We don't want it. And then finally, this got put out. This is Yair Lapid. This guy is a center-left politician. He is the opposition leader in the Knesset to Netanyahu. He is the favorite in the clubhouse to win the election for prime minister in October. He served as the prime minister of Israel from June of 2021 to June 2022. So he has been prime minister. He replaced Netanyahu. Listen to what he says here.
I want to use this opportunity to send a clear message to our enemies. No matter who is in government in Israel, we will always know how to defend ourselves. We will always strike at those who seek to harm us. I say especially to the Iranian regime, we will never allow you to build up a missile threat against our people again. Your terror proxies will never be given a moment's peace, and you will never be allowed nuclear weapons. My position is clear. It is time to strike at the foundations of the regime. The people of Israel deserve to live in safety. The people of Iran deserve freedom and a better life. The Middle East deserves a future of peace and prosperity. Israel will stand united. There will be no opposition coalition during war with Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu and I will put aside our differences for the defense of our country, for the defense of our people. All of Israel will unite behind our soldiers and pilots.
Yeah. So this, and then it's also posted. This is in Hebrew, so I didn't really bother putting the video up. But this went all over the place the other day. Same guy in a press conference saying that he endorses the Greater Israel boundaries that Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee were discussing. And he says, yeah, like that, like, I think this is a good idea. And again, this guy is a self-described like center-left politician, the leader of the opposition to Netanyahu. He is the antithesis to Netanyahu in Israeli politics. And so what is being revealed here for those who are actually paying attention is that there is no like earnest peace-seeking ally partner in the Israeli political landscape, as far as I can tell. There are people in Israel who oppose the war, who oppose Zionism, who oppose Greater Israel, who oppose all that stuff. They don't have any political power. They don't have any clout. They don't have any ability to form a government in the Knesset and lead Israel, because the guy who is favored to take it over is this guy who just said, yeah, let's go start a war with Iran. If we do that, we will stop attacking Netanyahu, and we will support you, Netanyahu. Does that not give Netanyahu like every incentive to pursue a war with Iran? Right? Like, yes. Oh, you mean you're going to stop accusing me of like funding October 7th? You're going to stop accusing me of funding Hamas? You're going to stop accusing me of being a traitor to Israel if I start a war with Iran? Absolutely, let's go start a war with Iran. And then the last thing I'll show you. This guy, this is Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid were able to defeat Netanyahu in the 2021 election by presenting themselves as co-prime ministers. So while Yair Lapid was the prime minister from June of 2021 to June of 2022, Naftali Bennett was the alternate prime minister, and then he rotated in June of 2022 and served for 6 months. He was supposed to serve a full year, and then it was going to rotate back to Yair Lapid. But then Netanyahu was able to politic and get the Knesset to abandon these guys, so the government collapsed. They held new elections, and then that was when Netanyahu formed his unholy alliance with the religious zealots, the ultra orthodox. This guy Naftali Bennett is right wing. He's and again, right wing means something very different over there than it does in America. People get very confused by that. But the difference between like he's very much an extremist when it comes to Israeli expansionism, when it comes to the Greater Israel Project. He's all for that. The difference is that he presents himself as a secularist. So he's like, I don't buy into all the religious stuff. I just think Israel should be big and strong, basically, right? I'm a secularist. So for that reason, the ultra Orthodox do not support him because he kind of stiff arms the whole religious wing of their community. But listen to what he said the other day.
So we have to build a lot of assets, so they need us a lot. Because I've come to one conclusion: they're not going to love us. The aspiration that the world will love Israel, it's not going to happen. What we need is that our enemies fear us, our friends respect us, and everyone needs us. We tried the love us thing for about 3,000 years. Didn't work.
Yeah. So his basically he's saying the world will never love Israel, so it should learn to fear it. Yeah. And that, which is of course that's like a statement of a tyrant, right? Is it better to be loved or feared? And
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That's funny.
So let's go back to the central thesis of like, why is Trump doing all of this? Like, why is he allowing this to play out this way? Why doesn't he just go put a fork in all this and say, Netanyahu, you're a sociopath. We're not doing any of this. We're not going to support your warmongering. We're done. Because what would happen is there would be a revolt within like the American political establishment against him. And the media, of course, would jump right in. And all of the evangelicals who have been conditioned their whole life to view Israel as like this great thing would view Trump as like a threat to Israel. However, Trump is just kind of stepping back, kind of like he did when he allowed Joe Biden to become president, and just like letting them have the stage. Here's the megaphone. Like, maybe the best way to defeat Zionism is to elevate it and give them a megaphone and say, why don't you tell everybody what you're all about? And they're like, well, what we're all about is we're all about conquering the entire Middle East and taking it all for ourselves because these people are dangerous. These Arabs are dangerous. These Arabs want to kill all of us, so we need to kill all of them first. But there's no evidence of that. MBS is sitting there peaceful, like seeking peace, seeking a golden age, seeking a Vision 2030. Yeah. So, yeah, all of it's kind of being revealed, like if you're paying attention, but how much are people actually paying attention? I wonder. I don't know if they really are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I've got a couple of quick questions I'll throw at you to get your thoughts on it. So somebody watching Iona Colombo asked, would you please talk about Trump's association with the Chabad Lubavitch network? So that's one thing I'd be curious to get your thoughts on as well, because there is a certain politeness, even reverence that we've seen as far as the Rabbi Schneerson, the honoring of Rabbi Schneerson, the overlap there. So I'd be curious there. And another question I had was over the Kabbalah, since, Trump has also been, he's openly talked about how he's had a Kabbalah teacher since the 80s from the Rabbi Berg School, which is kind of like this Scientology, like a Kabbalah, popular Kabbalah for Westerners that has sort of a Scientology sort of system or makeup, according to people who left it. But one of the key guys, I forgot his name, is a rabbi from the Berg School that has been working with Trump on Kabbalah. So what about those two things in your mind? I'm sure you've encountered that. How do you rationalize that?
Yeah, it's concerning on its surface for sure. Like the Kabbalah is mysticism. When you're talking about Kabbalah, you're talking about Jewish mysticism. You're talking about magic. You're talking about wielding the powers of God, the powers of nature in the hands of practitioners. That's what Kabbalah is. Now, from your perspective, from the perspective of people who are looking at this from the outside, that makes Trump look like one of them, doesn't it? From the perspective of the Zionists, that makes Trump look like one of them, right? So when Trump says, hey, I'm going to back y'all, like, I got your back, like, yeah, let's go do a war with Iran. And he's kind of encouraging them to speak up and to kind of like be honest with the public and kind of tell the public what they actually think. They think Trump's actually on their side.
Right. So you're saying it's a trust building tactic too. Okay.
Could be.
All right.
Could
Yep.
be. I mean, could be. I mean, I could have
Can't
that wrong.
discount that.
Yeah.
We can't discount that.
Yeah, yeah, you can't discount it. But I mean, it's one of those things that, like, remember, Trump was an FBI informant in the 80s, where he built at a casino in Atlantic City and then went to the FBI. We have all this documented. Went to the FBI, told the FBI not only did he want them to help him design the casino to make it basically one giant security building where they were just like monitoring all these mobsters, but he wanted the FBI agents to work undercover in the casino once it was opened. And then he basically acted as like an informant against the mob in Atlantic City. So, like, Trump has experience in doing that. He has experience in kind of like playing the bait and switch, and then he would throw his arms around these mobsters and be like, "Come into my casino, like, yeah, bring all your friends, like, let's go in here and have fun." And then they come in there, and then they were all being like recorded the entire time, and they were basically engaging with FBI agents, not even realizing it. So, I mean, he, like, deep cover, like, yeah, like Trump has that experience. Like, we know that for a fact. That's documented in FBI declassified documents. You know, again, like, when we talk about misinformation, I just want to point this out. I'm going to call out people in the chat. Gordon Q, the Arab nations want Iran gone as much as Israel. That's what the narrative is. That's what the liars on Fox News will tell you. Yeah. And that was probably true years ago. I mean, years ago, that's what they said. By the way, that's how Trump got the entire Republican establishment to buy into the Abraham Accords, because he pitched it to them, and Netanyahu, for that matter, as, hey, this is going to be an opportunity to put all the Arabs on one team. They've all been kind of at odds with one another. Let's get all the Arabs on one team, and then we can leverage that relationship against Iran, and we can get the Arabs to fight Iran. And all the Republicans were like, whoa, that is brilliant. And then last October 2024, remember, 2 weeks before the election, Netanyahu was saying, we really should go ahead and strike Iran. And Lindsey Graham was saying, before the election, we should go ahead and bomb all the oil fields in Iran, right? Which would have started a war with China, because China is dependent on them for oil. Who was it who showed up on October 24th and backed Iran? Saudi. The Saudi Navy all of a sudden was hosting a joint naval exercise for the first time in history with Iran. And they stepped in and said, no, you're not doing it. Who's stepping in right now and making sure that they don't have a war? Saudi. They're the ones who are basically standing on the table saying, absolutely not. You can't use our soil. All the Arab countries are now saying you can't use our soil. Jordan, all of them, they've all come out and said, you can't use our soil if you want to attack Iran. We're not going to go for it, because we know that it's going to launch, the entire region is going to be brought to its knees in a massive war. This isn't going to be, if they do what they're talking about doing, this isn't going to be like it was last year or the year before, where you send 100 missiles to Iran and then Iran sends 100 missiles back that crash in the desert. What Iran said, they sent a letter to the UN, which makes it formal. It makes it lawful now under international law. They said, if we are attacked by either Israel or the United States, we will attack every single military base in the region. We will make sure that we attack the important infrastructure of Israel. We will make sure that we attack major sites in foreign Arab countries. Everybody is going to be involved now. Like, nobody gets to walk away if we get attacked by Israel or the United States. So understand that. And this is us basically showing our fangs and warning you that if you attack us, the consequences will be extremely extreme. And Russia and China have Iran's back on this. They did a joint naval exercise last week. So, you know, that should be very sobering for people, that 3 of the 4 most powerful militaries in the world are on the same team. And for all the people who think that, like, you're just going to go fight this quick little war with Iran, and it's going to be, you know, like fun in the sun. That's what people also thought in 1860 at the Battle of Bunker Hill. They were like, literally, the elites came and brought blankets and had picnics, and then they watched the goriness, and they were like, holy shit, this is like the worst possible war, is like the worst possible thing you could imagine. They thought it was going to be like a little skirmish in the afternoon, and then it would be over. And then it led to the bloodiest war in American history. This is not going to be like a little like tit for tat thing. Iran has made it very clear that they are going to destroy the Middle East if they are attacked, and Russia and China have their back, and Russia and China are going to get involved. And it's going to basically lead to World War III. So is that, like, for all the people who think that this is a good idea, does that really sound like a good idea to you? Like, I don't understand when people say that they think this is a good idea. It's like, this is a really, like, even if you think that Iran is like super evil and whatever, like they're going to do really evil things if we allow them to exist, how is this the right idea? Like the right idea is to start a war between Russia, China, and Iran with the US, Europe, and Israel. And that's somehow going to this is Ukraine all over again. You know?
Look, peace loses all meaning if you don't have war, okay?
Yeah.
Who cares about justice if you don't have injustice? You got to give justice meaning by doing injustice for justice to have value and beauty. And so, yeah, of course, we need to bomb and kill to create peace and goodness and love.
Gordon, I'm calling you up, brother. Like, okay, you will see that I'm right. We'll see. You might be right, but I mean, like, see that hubris though, like that cockiness is like the last thing before we shut it down. I was writing about the hockey game. Sorry about the hockey game, by the way. Yeah. But the kid who won the game, right, gets his teeth knocked out and then turns around and scores the winning goal, right? It's like that's American grit. Like that's like grit. That's what we need right now moving forward. Like if we're gonna win this thing, we need grit. But we shouldn't confuse grit with hubris, because I think over the past 10 years, MAGA has been seduced by ego and seduced by hubris that like we're right about everything and everything that we think is the right thing. Like we're right about everything, and any thought we have that crosses our mind, that crosses the zeitgeist, is the right thing. Anything that comes out of Trump's mouth is the right thing. Trump contradicts himself all the time. He literally will post like a Mark Levin clip and then he'll put up something like by Tucker, right? Like in the same day. Like he contradicts himself all the time, because I think what he's really doing is he's turning the volume down so that you can kind of hear the signal coming out of all these different camps. And what we have to understand is that the same people who are pushing us into this war right now are the exact same people who took us into Iraq 25 years ago, took us into Afghanistan 25 years ago. And 10 years ago, when we started on this path, on this journey, MAGA, the whole idea was that those people were evil. The whole idea was that those people are the ones who ruined our country, the people who robbed us of all of our wealth, the people who basically destroyed America. And now all of a sudden we're being seduced by these people and tricked into thinking that they are right and that we should listen to them again. And I'm a lot less discouraged by the fact that these psychopaths are trying to start a war. I mean, that's just what they do. That's what psychopaths and sociopaths do. I'm more discouraged by like the reaction from our community, where like there seems to be a lot of people who think it's a good idea and are like really betraying the values of MAGA and first principles and the things that we talked about 10 years ago when this journey started. And I don't know if these are like newcomers who have joined the movement since then, who maybe weren't really as read in on it 10 years ago and understood that war is bad and that we shouldn't try to start war, who when Trump said, I'm going to be the most peaceful president of all time, I'm not going to start like forever wars. What do you think Iran's going to be? You think Iran's going to be a 2-day war, a 12-day war? Iran's going to be the biggest war we've fought since World War II.
Yeah, I think with those words, those wise words of warning, that we can maybe transit over to any possible comments that caught your eye before we phase out of today's little journey through the world of geopolitics with a historic lens. What do you think? Did any messages come out that?
Yeah, we have a rant from Antmon 24, $5 off topic. But do either of ye have a view on Unity Mitford? Was she a spy or just kind of a foolish member of the English upper class? I went ahead and pulled her Wikipedia up. I'm not really familiar with this woman. I don't know if you are. Unity Mitford.
I'm looking at her. Unity Mitford. Was she tied to Oswald Mosley?
It says that she was
Swastika, right? Yeah, she's born in. Okay, yeah. This is coming back to me now. I hadn't thought about her for a long time. Unity was one of the Mitford sisters, 6 girls born to David Freeman Mitford, wife Sidney Bowles. Okay. Unity was in Munich when the United Kingdom declared war on Germany, and she attempted suicide by shooting herself in the head, surviving but with extensive brain damage. Yeah, so right, and her sister Mitford was coincidentally, considering her later beliefs, conceived in the town of Swastika, Ontario, Canada, which is a weird occult center as well. That I brushed up against this when I was doing work on the Revenge of the Mystery Cults books. And it says here, Diana Mosley's biographer. So Diana Mosley is, I think, the daughter of Oswald Mosley, who is the Nazi of England. That's the head of the British Union of Fascists, who would have been the Nazi prime minister. He was also a theosophist and part of the Fabian Society, which is ironic because that's normally sold to the left, but yet, he was the fascist head of Britain, which catered to the right. So it shows you that this whole left-right dichotomy is a game. It's a play. And she was, I think, working to create a diplomatic bridge between Oswald Mosley and Hitler. So she and her sister Swastika were real big, like they were priestesses of the Hitler cult, and provided the messaging between Oswald Mosley and Hitler to coordinate British-German collaboration before and during the war, until a decision was made in England to abandon the pro-Nazi project. As people know, right? They took down the pro-Nazi king was removed. The pro-Nazi prime minister Neville Chamberlain was removed, and Oswald Mosley was put in a very comfy jail, but for like 5 years. So that whole thing was abandoned at that time when it became clear that the Nazi thing wasn't going to work. I think she tried to shoot herself in the head and was not successful. I think she survived and lived kind of like as a retarded person for the rest of her life. But yeah, Cynthia's actually done some work on her too. And I got to ask Cynthia if we get her back on the show to maybe go through some of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like she may have been retarded even before she shot herself in the head, but
oh, yeah.
I don't know. It says right here, her sister was like a huge Vladimir Lenin stan. Like she was a huge fan of Vladimir Lenin. So one of the sisters, these are all like highborn British women, British ladies, right? They're from a very, very prominent family, it seems, going back to the Norman invasion. And again, like I don't know anything about these people, but it says that she was a big simp for Hitler and her sister was a big simp for Vladimir Lenin. That's a big red flag to me. Like that to me. And then this picture right here, there's something very sinister about this picture. I don't know what it is, but
yeah. No, they were clearly like groomed to be these influencers who would get close to men with power and adore them, give them what they wanted, but also receive in return, certain information and handle them. But they themselves clearly had handlers, as many of these witches do. Like there's always a warlock where there's a witch or a coven.
Yeah. And again, like from what I've learned studying like what the British were doing in the 1730s in India, which they actually learned from the French. They watched the French do it first, and then they were like, oh, that's brilliant. Like rather than sending our own soldiers into India to go fight these warlords, we can just pay off one warlord to fight the other warlord. And really, if we can ideally control both warlords, then, we can pit one against the other, and whatever we want on a given day, maybe we give more support to one warlord over the other. Controlling both sides, like you said, and they were known for the British were known for doing that. They were known for supporting both sides. World War II is a great example, right? They were supporting the Bolsheviks and they were supporting the Third Reich. So that family right there seems like a pretty good like manifestation of that you have two sisters who are sharing a bedroom, and one of them has Vladimir Lenin posters on the wall and the other one has an Adolf Hitler poster on the wall. And yeah, like they're having relationships with these men. It's like, that is sketchy.
That's a picture of Unity right there with Hitler. She had strangely full access to Hitler. Like he adored having this woman at his like heels all the time, giving him what he wanted. But this is a National Post, a Canadian newspaper, that has this interesting observation that the Nazi from Swastika, Ontario, how Canada's most unusually named town spawned a notorious Hitler fangirl, which again brings in this question, which is so difficult to research because, I mean, we're in British territory here in Canada, and there is this strange occult fascist underground that is highly incubated across Canada, and it's difficult to triangulate in on because nobody does the work. Nobody's done the investigative reporting into it. So to try to like piece together what this thing is somewhat difficult. But like you said, there's these anomalies. That's where the mind really makes a discovery, is where the paradox is, where the anomalies don't fit, So you want to focus on that. And the fact that she was conceived in swastika and had this weird destiny.
That's such a weird.
Strange,
I saw
strange
that
creatures.
I saw that data point in her Wikipedia. It says she was conceived in a town called Swastika in Ontario, Canada. Like what? Like how do you even know that? Number one, right? It's like that feels like an occult, ritual.
Well, again, her. Yeah,
like
I think swastika was in her name too. That's why I think. Anyway, yeah, it's absolutely the case. Okay, so yeah, the world's weird. There's weird subterranean stuff.
And if she's an adult woman, like during the era of Hitler, like the 30s, then that means when she was conceived, like the Third Reich didn't exist, right? Like the swastika was still just some Indian symbol meaning peace, right?
Well, if it was prevalent in a Western community, it would have been because of the Theosophists.
And
their German branch, which was run by. No, this thing goes back to that's who started popularizing it in a big way in the 1870s, where it was Blavatsky's followers for a Western audience. But then you had German outgrowths like Franz Hartmann, who ran the German Theosophists with people like Rudolf Steiner for a period, who had the control of the Swiss apparatus, bringing in different variations of how to think about the swastika. You know, you had the Guido von List, who is the head of the Ariosophists, which was basically just a spin-off of the Theosophists, who introduced more of a Nordic Viking Druid emphasis and de-emphasized some of the Hindu aspects of it. But you find in ancient Druid runes swastika-like imagery as well, and they just impose their own meaning into it. And you had, like the right hand spin of the swastika and the left hand spin indicating the left and the right path as far as the occult ritual approaches to manipulating systems and societies, using the Apollonian and Dionysian, the feminine and the masculine mystique, the masculine being the one that's more like fascist, aggressive, penetrating from the top with authoritarian, Apollonian, will to power. That's sort of the right wing flavor of the occult path, and then the other left hand would be the more feminine, subdue and destroy by seduction, by embracing and sucking in, into. So you have these two approaches that work together. Like one is more Fabian society, Marxist sort of, it takes that approach of using sympathy, emotions in terms of their expansion of power. The other one is more logical imposition of thought and will, but they play together. That's why the Bolsheviks and the fascists were both being funded by the same Wall Street and London high-level bankers that had the same occult handlers at the top, trying to manage and influence both the Hitlers as well as the Lenins. Makes very, very clear sense when you look at it from the standpoint of how that formula works. What do you got there, and what did you highlight?
Okay, so again, I was just like scanning this as you were talking, and this is like really weird. Again, this is from Wikipedia, so take it for what it is. All of this appears to have like links sourcing it, but so whatever, we got to run all that down. It says Hitler became smitten with the young blonde British student. He was struck by her curious connections to the Germanic culture, including her middle name Valkyrie. She was invited to sit by him at dinner parties, film screenings, and Nuremberg rallies. Mitford's grandfather, Bertram Freeman Mitford, had been a friend of Richard Wagner, one of Hitler's idols, and had written introductions to two works of Houston Stewart Chamberlain. Dolly says, quote, Hitler was extremely superstitious, and he believed that unity was sort of sent to him. It was destined. Mitford subsequently received invitations to party rallies and state occasions, and was described by Hitler as, quote, a perfect specimen of Aryan womanhood. Hitler and Mitford became close, with Hitler reportedly playing Mitford off against his new girlfriend, Eva Braun, apparently to make her jealous. Braun wrote of Mitford in her diary, quote, she is known as the Valkyrie and looks the part, including her legs. I, the mistress of the greatest man in Germany and the whole world, I sit here waiting while the sun mocks me through the window panes. It says Braun regained Hitler's attention after an attempted suicide, and Mitford learned from this, despite measures were often needed to capture the Führer's attention. So were these, like, basically it's like these chicks were all nuts, and they were all basically like jealous of one another, and they were just like trying to kill himself, like attempted suicide to try to get Hitler's attention. Like, is that am I reading this right? Like, this sounds like a bunch of sociopaths on like a really bad reality television show.
Yeah, concurred. No, I mean, but it shows you, like, I think
that's
that
remarkable.
this
That's remarkable.
Yeah, and well, it's reminiscent in some ways of what we've seen from the monarch mind control operations, but a little bit more sophisticated in some ways. And they're from high-level families too, right? They're not from like they're not just any little sex bunny that you would see and manipulate by psychiatrists and drugs and everything else. There's something more going on as well. It's a fascinating aspect of how the world is run, which is witch covens and the whole ritual to keep that type of unnatural system in play that controls leaders, that influences them. And this is what the Jesuits also interface with. I mean, this is what the Templars were, they were burned as the first sort of major witch burning. And I'm not for witch burnings, don't get me wrong. However, there was a thing. The reason why those things were happening was because there was real hardcore black magician sorcerers doing things with children, abductions, other rituals that were tied to the ancient pagan mystery religions that Christianity was doing battle with in the early days of Jesus's movement. This is also what the healthiest aspects of the Jewish prophets were also fighting against. When you read the Old Testament, and there's like 30, 40 references to battles against the worshiping of Moloch, of Baal, of these various, like, it's all over the place. It's in Kings, it's in Chronicles, it's in everywhere you look. If you're looking for it, you see it everywhere. Now Brett Hour just said Matt isn't for witch burnings. Can we even leave a thumbs up after that? but seriously, like the Templars were, it seems, really doing some serious black magic in under Solomon's temple, which was, or the Dome of the Rock, right, which was the Templar stables, and that's where they managed their headquarters for a long time. And that's where it seems like they really did have an eschatological vision for the kingdom of Jerusalem as a weird place that was involved with, in their mind, the type of human sacrifice, demonology, interfacing with demons, gematria stuff that is located in the writings of, like, these medieval writings, like the Testament of Solomon, which they try to act as so ancient and so old. It's not. This thing was like cooked up in like the early 12th century. It's not ancient, but they want to act like it's ancient because they want to try to get people to think that the real Solomon is not the Solomon in the Bible who wrote Ecclesiastes. It's not that Solomon. It's the Solomon in the Testament of Solomon who is using, necromancy and demonology and magic to wield and the army of demons that built Solomon's temple, right, and was carrying out human sacrifice by worshiping Baal and Moloch, which actually, that part is actually in the Old Testament, but he got over it in the Old Testament. In the Testament of Solomon, he didn't. And that's what they want. That seems to be what they have in mind. So you've always had this weird thing there, and the Jesuits came out of that. As Albert Pike has made the point in his Morals and Dogma in 1871, the Jesuits were a rebranded Templar order. The Templars were inferior Jesuits, but there is a provable direct continuity between the Templars taken down in 1312 or 1317 and the Jesuit emergence in 1534. That there's a total continuity there. So, and this is, again, ties into what techniques were used in the Muslim Brotherhood land, except they weren't allowed to really use women witches as much. Maybe they were, but it doesn't seem so. But then you got weird stuff with the Druze, right? These other Gnostic sects that are these weird smorgasbords of like esoteric Islam, Gnosticism, Zoroastrianism that create these weird groups, like the Druze, like the Alawites, like the Yazidis, the Lucifer worshippers, of which there are 3 million living in Lebanon and Iraq and Armenia and Palestine. And you're like, what are these things? It seems like they're often persecuted, but what are they? Like,
yeah, it's really weird. It's super weird.
And a lot of them are good people, but there seems to be a nucleus, some sort of an esoteric nucleus inside of these things that are very happy, that have a very, very strange, dark view of reality, and that are willing to sacrifice their own uninitiated people in broader, I guess you could say, ritual movements, kind of like the Zionists. Netanyahu is part of something that is more than happy to slaughter his own people if it benefits some higher eschatological prophecy or vision that he thinks, must happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned Solomon's temple. I mean, they are openly talking about wanting to rebuild the third temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's definitely like some occult stuff going on. And of course, Jesus is the third temple. So there's no reason to rebuild it. And Jesus is the one who condemned the second temple and said this temple will be destroyed because Jerusalem, the temple, turned its back on God because they rejected the Messiah. So it was Jesus. I mean, Rome was the instrument that ultimately did that decades later, but it was Jesus who said every stone on this temple will be torn down. And that's where I think a lot of the evangelicals kind of miss it, where they like forget that that's what happened, is that Jesus is the one who said, because you betrayed us, because you broke the covenant of Abraham, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain. You said that when God sent the Messiah, you would accept him. You didn't accept him. So therefore, this temple has to be destroyed. And that's what happened. And so now when they talk about rebuilding the temple, they're not building something for God. They're building something for somebody else. And you got to wonder who that is. And my guess is it's the Antichrist. And according to our friend Eric Rice, who's attended some of these meetings where they're talking about rebuilding the third temple, where like Ted Cruz's father has been, he said that their goal, like they understand that these people worship the Antichrist, but according to them, once they succeed in summoning the Antichrist, then Jesus will return to fight the Antichrist in like this big melee battle, right? Like as it's foretold. So these people are like leaning into this occult mysticism stuff because they think they can like force God's hand and get Jesus to come back. Like that's what the motives are of like these high level evangelicals who are facilitating a lot of this stuff at the highest levels. It's very, very sinister, obviously. So
it is very sinister indeed. And then you got the weird, like again, occult spinoffs, like you see with L. Ron Hubbard's operating Thetan ideology and stuff, which perceives, has their own Gnostic sort of spin on creation, and how he even was he created this OT8 ceremony, which went public. Somebody whistleblowed and made it public, where he outlined in 1981 or 82 his belief that his role is the Antichrist, because in his idea, the forces that sent, I guess, Xenu, this evil dictator that sent all of these disembodied spirits into the volcanoes that then like took over our bodies and organized the evolutionary flow of the human species were in fact composed of all of these disembodied demon spirits. That's actually the God of the Old Testament analog, and that the Mercabian order, this galactic federation, are actually the Luciferian, truth seekers that were encouraging Eve and Adam to break free of the tyranny of the tyrannical God that didn't want us to have knowledge. Yep. And the Luciferian snakes, the Sethians, the serpents, are actually
the light bringer. The light bringer who's bringing you all the knowledge that God deprived you of. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So exactly. Yep. And then he describes how he sees himself as the Antichrist, whose job it is to keep this new age, this second coming from happening.
Yep.
And you got this
God is a tyrant. God is a tyrant, and tyrants are evil, so therefore God is evil, right? It's like that's the logic. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you got things like again, you're bringing Babylonian workings, so this guy's doing Babylonian workings with Jack Parsons in the desert. Both of them are members of the Aleister Crowley OTO Lodge, right? The Ordo Templi Orientis Lodge, where they're trying to invoke the Antichrist through these weird sex magic rituals. Jack Parsons is also setting up and working with the Manhattan Project at Caltech. He's the one setting up the Jet Propulsion's labs. That's bringing in all of these Nazi scientists as well. And at the same time, they say he died in 1951, but his official biographers like Robert Anton Wilson all allude to the fact that he didn't die and he lived out his life in Israel, which is where he was actually caught. There was a whole investigation in the 40s over Jack Parsons, who was caught transferring classified weapons information from the Manhattan Project that he was a part of at Caltech into hands of Israeli military officials. And there was a whole official investigation on Jack Parsons. So again, they say he blew himself up. no real evidence that actually happened. You got the whole like weird Satanist crowd around like Moshe Dayan, like Anton LaVey's assistant, even wrote a book saying that his Book of Satan was actually written by Moshe Dayan's son. Moshe Dayan being a pretty genocidal, high-level figure in the Haganah. And then, you look at the actual contours of the original Babylonian Empire.
This is the Neo-Babylonian Empire at its apex.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that. That is Greater Israel, right, guys?
It's not that different.
Like all the evangelicals need to understand something, that you are following people who want to recreate the Babylonian Empire. Think about what that means.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to recreate Babylon. And you think that like God is on your side here. It's like I think you have miscalculated who you're actually following. I think you're actually following the people who are against God. So I think that's going to become, I think, very obvious here in the future. But yeah, I mean, it's like all the hallmarks are there, all the signs are there, but people are just ignoring the signs. And yeah, so I think we'll just keep going until it happens. But we probably should shut it down. I see we have a large crowd who just joined us. Thanks for coming in, guys. Share the show. Go back to the beginning and listen from the beginning. Hit the thumbs up. We appreciate y'all stopping by. But yeah, Matt, we will see you next week.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Till next week. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. So I said we were both very tired beginning this, but this was better than coffee. So yeah. All right. It was a pleasure. All right. Take care, Gordon.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.